We have an incredibly rich new collection of colors by Farrow and Ball and Liberty Interiors Fabrics. 15 archived colors that were put together by these two companies to create a phenomenal range of colors. So let's talk about it. Welcome back to The Paint People, the channel devoted to all things painting and decorating. If you're not familiar, Farrow and Ball is an extremely reputable paint company that started in the United Kingdom over 75 years ago. Liberty has a beautiful and historic luxury department store in London, England that is known for its very close connection to art and culture, and it's all channeled through its beautiful fabrics. The two companies coming together, truly a match made in heaven, and the collection itself really is kind of classic charm combined with modern flair, and I love that. So we have 15 colors to talk about today, and these are all Farrow and Ball paint colors that don't necessarily belong to the main core group of colors that you might recognize. They were archived, but then brought back for this collection. And what's cool about this is on the Farrow and Ball website, which I'll show you right now, you can see the Liberty Interiors fabric that goes alongside each color itself. And this can really give you some hints as to how you can start building an entire color palette with each color. So without further ado, let's start with the first one, which is called Clunch. One of my favorite paint color names to say. This color is sort of a soft, chalky off-white that has a real creaminess to it. It ends up being a pretty versatile color that you can really throw a lot at it, but the fabric recommended for it is called Persian Voyage in the Jade Stone coloration. So it looks like they actually picked up on that light, creamy beigey backdrop of the fabric and then materialized it in the color Clunch, which is interesting because that's sort of what I do when I'm selecting paint colors based off of some sort of textile or area rug. I just try to pick one of the neutral tones within it, extract it, and then put it on the walls. And it looks like that's what they did here. Love the beautiful jade coloration, although it looks like they've used a slightly different coloration in this picture here, which seems fair because Clunch, it's pretty darn versatile. Next up, we have Smoked Trout, which is a slightly dusty brown midtone that Farrow and Ball describes as a warm mushroom color. We see another use of Persian Voyage, although this time coming in the pewter coloration. Looking closely, it is very much a grayscale looking fabric, but we do notice a little bit of a faded peach coloration when we zoom in, which is loosely related to brown, aka the brown found in Smoked Trout. So there's still a connection there, although this one is a tad more contrasty. The paint color in this case really stands out with its richness, even though it's kind of neutral, all things considered. And then you have the intricate design of the fabric in this sort of black and white detailing that's surrounding the brown. This is what I love about this collection because it's an interesting interpretation on reddish brown meets monochromatic gray, kind of an old and new coming together. Moving on to the next color, which is a similar paint color to the last one, although this one just has quite a bit more of a red undertone and it's also quite a bit lighter. It has this blush rosiness to it that makes it very charming, and Poppy Meadow Field in the lichen coloration, which is the fabric that goes with it, also has some of those very colors within it. Not exactly, but there's definitely some dusty rose, and then there's these rich golden yellows and the flower petals that all come together really beautifully. Another great example of how you can take the corresponding fabric that goes with a paint color and then plan out your entire color scheme accordingly. Farrow and Ball, they're really just doing all the work for you here. Now let's turn up the volume on that red undertone with Fruit Fool. Amazing name. Another mid-tone color that I'm really fond of, and I may actually use it in my bedroom coming up in the next few months, so stay tuned for that. Almost has kind of a red salmon type of coloration that's definitely more raspberry pinky than orange, but it's sort of a combination of everything, really. It has a definite retro feel to it that I'm sort of obsessed with. Palampore Trail is the corresponding fabric in the lacquer coloration. And compared to the paint, it's a more modest amount of saturation, but the undertones are definitely similar. You have bits of red, some orange, and a lot of peach all over. But there's also little hints of pale gray-green complementing everything else, which can give you a hint as to how you can introduce different colors seamlessly. A favorite of mine is called Cola, the red-brown off black paint color. Definitely dark and maybe not for everyone for all things, but that noticeable amount of warmth does a great job at bringing some life into such a dark color. And speaking of life, the fabric that goes alongside it is called Botanical Flora, also in that lacquer coloration. And again, we see a large amount of peachy pink, some rich ruby reds, and all these shades of brown and green, which really can pop off of a cola backdrop. There's also some yellow too, which really stands out in a huge way. Moving on to a few blues, I now present you with Serge. S-E-R-G-E. There. Another really dark color, only this time we have a rich, dark denim blue. This is perfect for someone that doesn't necessarily want a greeny blue, which is interesting because the fabric they chose for it does have a little bit of that green and blue mixed in, and that is Regency Tulip in the lapis coloration. It's really cool because you're combining a deep, true navy blue, and then you have some of this sort of peacock type of coloration with a little bit of teal and some earthy olive greens as well. Beautifully composed, so simple but so elegant. And I have actually never really used navy and olive together, and now I might have to. Slow Blue, spelled S-L-O-E, interestingly enough, has a little more of that green undertone compared to the last color we talked about. And Farrow Ball does describe it as a black-based blue, which is fair because it is sort of shaded in general, but the thing that defines it to me is that little bit of green undertone present. Now the fabric that pairs with it has some of that aquatic blue in the background, although it appears a bit darker than the paint color, and it's definitely overshadowed by the insane detailings of the yellows, greens, golds, and sky blues that are decorated throughout. The juxtaposition between these two works so well because Slow Blue feels so rich, calm, and serene and slow. And then the fabric, which is, I believe, Felix Raison lichen coloration, it's a bright fabric that stands out so effectively because of that relationship it has with the paint color. Barrington Blue does feel a little lighter and more green. It also has a sense of buoyancy to it. And Palampore Trail in the lichen coloration is a seamless transition color that coordinates pretty perfectly. It essentially looks like a much lighter version of the paint color, decorated with lovely, slightly warm off-white flowers, grapes, and thistles. All things considered, this is one of the more straightforward pairings in my mind. How about a green that you can hardly tell is a green? That color is chine, or sheen green. And if you weren't looking closely, you could write this color off as black, but it does have a noticeable green undertone to it, which makes it a pretty interesting and subtle choice to use as an exterior off black to help reflect off of the green trees that you may have on your property. The fabric going along with it is Zenner Arbor in the plaster pink color. And this pairing is an interesting one to me. On the surface, it doesn't look like there's a ton of coordination between the two, although they do really look nice together. So why is that? That plaster pink color has the red undertones, which give it a classic appeal to me. It's a bit dusty. But other than that, you have a very light gray, and then there's this sort of darker, almost bluey color outlining the details. But what's cool about it is next to chine green, that bluey detail almost looks like a cool dark green within the fabric. The paint color almost transforms those darker detailings in the fabric. Really love this combination specifically. In fact, I think it might be my second favorite overall. My favorite, I'm saving for the end. Moving on to one of my favorite pickled foods, that would be olive. Olives are pickled, right? Pretty standard color here, although this olive is pretty rich and deep with its saturation, and it has a little more of a yellow undertone than some of the more brown-leaning olive colors that I've seen. It's beautifully rich, and its paired fabric is pretty exceptional and really stands out against it. It's called Poppy Meadowfield in the pewter blue color. And although you do have little pops of olive green within that fabric, it's a more soft green coloration that pales in comparison to all the other colors going on. I mean, we got deep teal, charcoal blue, tangerine orange. There's so much going on here that almost makes the green feel like a neutral color. It's a very stylized choice that maybe it wouldn't be something that I would use in my space, but I think it's a pretty cool choice altogether. Moving on to another green that is following a similar trend where you have a pretty deep green mixed with a very dynamic fabric. Suffield green is similar in depth to olive, but it has less of that yellow undertone present. It's a little softer and more leaf-like, I would say, and I could totally see it working with some really hip, beautiful mid-century modern furnishings. Just saying. Wiltshire Blossom in the lichen coloration is what we're paired with here. And again, you do see some of those green leaves that have a similar coloration to the paint color, but you hardly notice them because of these beautifully painted berries all throughout. It sort of speaks to green becoming a neutral paint color in the grand scheme of things. Not necessarily neutral in the same way that beige and gray was 10 years ago, where it just blends in, but neutral where it's the main color of your space. I mean, green is in, and not in just little pockets. It's really the dominant color of interior design this year. I think I like this combination a bit better than the last one. What about you? We're now taking a departure away from green, at least in regards to the paint color, but let's talk about the earthy yellow known as cane. It almost has a honey mustard-like quality where it combines a bit of gold and yellow and maybe a touch of sandy tan as well. So it doesn't feel overly out of place when you use it alongside the fabric Persian Voyage. Now we've seen Persian Voyage used before, but not in this coloration, which combines all sorts of green mixed with fiery yellows, oranges, and reds. Incredible color combination here. Although I will say that as a paint color and the fabric, they're both pretty dynamic. So unless that's what you're going for, maybe use them in a smaller fashion, in smaller doses, maybe as an accent, and surround them with something a little more passive so they can really live on their own around a more neutral canvas. That would be my gut feeling here at least. Archive is a mid-tone taupey beige that has a little bit of gray and brown to deepen it slightly. I really like this classic, dare I say, kind of safe color. So you would think that you would need to throw a vibrant piece of fabric to really complete the whole look and prevent it from feeling too monotonous. And that's why they recommend Marquez Garden in Lichen Rose, which has a touch of rosiness to it, but it's mainly dominated by blues, greens, and a bit of yellow. I think there was honestly quite a few different fabric options you could have used with Archive because everything about that paint color just feels versatile and flexible to me. It's one of those lighter mid-tone neutrals that are warm and inviting and really can go with a number of different looks. A similar take on a much different color is the combination of Pantalon and Wiltshire Blossom in the Lapis dark color. At first you probably see a dark gray-brown combined with a vibrant blue fabric. But if we look closely at the leaves in this particular coloration, they have this green-brown look to them. And then you can find some green in Pantalon's undertones as well. So they actually have more of a connection than I initially thought when I first saw them. But my favorite pairing of the bunch, here it is. It's awesome because of its simplicity. And to me, it epitomizes old and new, which is something I love. The paint color is called Chemise, which is a rich modern taupe that combines a stone gray and brown. I do love me some earthy taupes and all the colors that are related to it. But what makes this whole look to me is the fabric they pair it with, which is called Hera Plume in pewter. Just a stunning back and forth of brown and gray, and the fabric itself is almost silvery with touches of dusty warm brown woven into the peacock feather details. It's a phenomenal combination of styling with neutrals that are visibly different but work together so beautifully. I'd like to know which color combinations you like the most down below, and also which paint color do you want me to take a look at in an episode of Color Code. That's our color review series, don't you know? Aren't those fabrics awesome, by the way?